Sometimes you find something, it speaks to you so much that you just got to share it with somebody else, and I think that's what this is for me. Doing some study recently, I came across the writings of Dr. Everly, and who's somebody I do a lot of reading about, and he introduced a concept that I have heard of but never really thought about. When you start thinking about COVID these days, there's something that's happening with COVID that is more than a medical problem. I'm not here to argue about it medically. What I'm here to say is that the percentage of people that it's affecting physically is just a small touch of what it's doing to us psychologically. He introduced us to this term called disasters of uncertainty, pandemics and epidemics and those kinds of things, these big, large events. And one of the things that he talks about is that they may have the most psychological toxin of any disaster that we go through. And when you start talking about psychological toxin, it's just that venom, if you want to use that word, that changes the way we think. It affects our brain. It affects our worldview. It affects our attitude. And we can see that that's kind of going on around us right now, that the world seems to have changed a little bit. The psychological impact of something like what we're going on right now is probably maybe 50 times or more greater than the physical impact of what's happening to us right there. And so there's a formula for that, and I think the formula is fascinating. And that is this: how much will affect us. First of all, is lethality. So death, people can argue death. That's a political football that gets kicked around, 1% of 1%. But I don't think any of us can argue about the financial impact. In fact, I don't know that we fully understand the financial impact of COVID yet. So that's one factor. Then you multiply that time chronicity, the length of time this is going to go on. And we've seen from the very beginning that, it was only supposed to be a few months, and now we're talking into 2021 before this thing gets over, the way they're talking these days. And then you multiply that times ambiguity, and Lord, we get some bonus points for that, don't we? I mean, who do you believe? How is it passed? What kind of mask works? Can you believe the media, the politicians? Does it go away in November? There's a lot of stuff around this, and so suddenly, when you add these kind of things up, that the scale of toxin for this particular event can be huge. And then you start talking about first responders, which is the group that I hang out with. And you start looking at them, we get bonus points for these. The second one here on the list to me is probably one of the most significant, and that is, for the first time in all my years doing this, I've really heard people concerned about carrying something home to their families for the first time. And then you can see all the other things that go with it. I met with a therapist the other day, and I said, "How are we doing?" And she said, "You are the most exhausted I've ever seen you." So when you start looking around at what we're going through, this I think gives a good picture of what a disaster of uncertainty looks like. And this one has been out since 2006. This idea is not a new idea. Remember the pre-disaster when we were hearing about it in China, and it was a world away, that warning phase. And then the impact phase hit. Whenever it started showing up here, then we had our first cases in Arkansas. That impact phase, one guy said it's like being hit in the nose. You back up, you're shook up, you really don't know what's going on, and you kind of got to re-get your bearings again. That was us. But then you notice after that, we kind of figured out we can do this thing, and the heroic phase was the part where, hey, we're in this together, and for first responders, everybody was feeding us, and we're going to make it. In fact, we were told if we can just get to June, this virus doesn't like heat, we're going to be okay. Postpone your vacations till September. Life is going to be good. And lo and behold, here we are, and we're looking at 2021. And my friends, that's when we entered into the disillusionment phase. Disillusionment phase takes the wind out of your sails. It's the part where we're lost suddenly. It's the part where things really begin to change. In fact, in the disillusionment phase, we can begin to see people that our optimism turns to discontent, that we're exhausted, substance use goes up, feelings of abandonment goes up. There's a lot that begins to happen in this phase. Depression sets in, anger, and if you look around, surely we're seeing that. So that's where we are. But how do we get out of that? And for the next minute, I want to share that with you because there's a lot in this. I'm just giving you kind of a 10,000-foot view of it. But coming to terms becomes a big part of this. And the big part of it really is how we hold the problem. And so what does it look like? The the last part of this, men are disturbed not by things but the views of which they take them. There's no doubt that we are facing some very difficult times. But in this place of disillusionment, what do you do? So George Everly offers some very, I think, good pointers, and so here's what they are. Pointer number one, at this stage, when you want to turn things around, when you really want to get into the rebuilding phase, the first one is be real. A lot of times when we're in this situation, it's not fair. We want to focus on that, and don't want to take responsibility for it. And he says the first step is you're here. Take responsibility for you're here. And once you embrace that, then little by little we can begin to move into rebuilding. The second thing is have a plan. Put it together. Something to cause you to move forward, because if you don't, you're going to become a part of somebody's plan. So number one, what are you going to do? Take responsibility and begin to have a plan. Number three, it's not just about you. It truly is still about us. Support others. Help others without any expectation of getting anything back. Begin to think outside of yourself, and some powerful things begin to happen. The fourth one here is that don't let negative things overwhelm you. The thing here is we get what we look for. Seek and you'll find. Somebody redid Kennedy's speech here where it says, ask not what your life can do for you, but ask what you can do for your life. Take responsibility for it and focus on the things that are not the negative side, but look for the good things. In fact, the last one is just this: be grateful. You see these things and you say it's kind of small, but I'm telling you, this pandemic, is not so much a physical thing, although it affects people physically. I lost a dear friend this week to COVID. That's not what I'm saying. I'm saying, though, that for a lot of us who will never be sick physically, psychologically, there can be a lot of toxin running around. And if we recognize it and begin to take the steps, it's something we can deal with. There's a lot more on this subject, but I at least want to introduce you to the thought. Take care of yourself.